Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back today with another Question the Narrative video, and today I'm going to be talking about Tartaria, Armageddon, and the Thousand-Year Reign. And this video, I think, is going to end up being a conglomeration of topics. Sometimes I feel like the things that I've been talking about recently are like this gigantic jigsaw puzzle, and we're just trying to fit the pieces together. And sometimes it seems that they fit nicely, and other times you have a missing piece and you just can't figure out where it is or where to look for it. So anyway, I wanted to start out with this quote by John A. Hutchinson. Unthinking faith is a curious offering to be made to the creator of the human mind. I know that sometimes when I discuss things that are not mainstream Christianity, that a lot of believers are uncomfortable with it, but God does not want us to be unthinking. He wants us to love him with our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the book of Acts even tells us that the Bereans were known because they studied the scriptures to see if the things that they were being told were true. So in Acts 17:11, it says, "And the people of Berea were more open-minded than those in Thessalonica, and they listened eagerly to Paul's message. They searched the scriptures day after day to see if Paul and Silas were teaching the truth." And I know that some of you prefer the King James Bible. I like reading from these newer translations, especially on my videos, because sometimes the King James Bible is a little hard for some people to understand. But I'll read King James also. It says, "These were more noble than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness of mind and searched the scriptures daily, whether those things were so." So it's the same thing, just different wording. The Bereans searched the scriptures daily to see if the things that they were being told were true. And really, when we are looking into this topic, when it comes to the thousand-year reign, we are searching the scriptures because we are trying to figure out what it means. And I think that a lot of times we get so stuck on just listening to what other people tell us, what the Bible says, that we don't take the time to read it ourselves. Yes, there are people who study the scriptures, and yes, there are people who are more well versed in what it says. But the whole reason that the Bible was printed for people to read was so that we would read it, so that we would not have to rely on what other people tell us that it says, because unfortunately, that doesn't always work out so well, does it? So yes, we should search the scriptures to see if these things are true. And so the things that I'm saying to you about the thousand-year reign and my speculations, and I'm certainly not saying that this is definitely the case, I'm just thinking about it, then I want you to search the things that I say and see if they're true. And I've got to say that I have really, really great people who watch my videos. And this video actually was inspired mostly by comments that I received. People always drop really great information in the comments. And so you're going to see in this video today, if you were one of those people who was sharing information, you might see something that you talked about in the comments, because some things really struck me. And I want to thank all of you who do send me that information, because a lot of times it brings up things that I had never even heard of. I know a lot of times people will leave me links to videos, and I appreciate that. I will say, though, that I get a lot of links to videos, and I honestly don't have time to watch all of the videos that I get links for. So if you have information you'd like to share, it's easier for me just to kind of, if you have maybe an article about it that you could link, that is likely it's likely better able to get my attention, because sometimes, yeah, I have so many videos that people would like me to watch. And again, sometimes I do watch them, but I'm afraid I'm missing a lot of information just because I don't have time to watch all of them. So I'm going to start out kind of reviewing a little bit of the things that I've already talked about. If this is the first video of mine that you're watching, you might be a little bit confused because you will be missing a lot of information that I already shared. So I will leave a link in the description box to my Question the Narrative playlist. And if you wanted to know more about the things that I'm going to be talking about today, you would want to be looking into my videos about Tartaria and the millennial reign. I believe it's the two, not the last video, but the one before, and then the one before that also. And that's really, and again, it's the Tartaria and millennial reign videos. But anyway, so I talked about this in last week's video too, about faking history, but this really was a question that a lot of people wanted to know. If the millennial reign, and that is what this idea is, if Tartaria, as we know it, was actually the 1,000-year reign of Christ, and if it actually already happened, how would it be hidden? And really, again, if this is your first time visiting, that is what the main focus is the whole idea that what we see and what we call Tartaria, and I'm not just talking about geographic Tartaria. I'm speaking of Tartaria as an idea of just this advanced civilization that had all of these beautiful buildings, like even what you see here in the Vatican. But yeah, go back and watch those videos if you wanted to know more about that. But anyway, people are asking if that really happened, if Christ reigned on earth during that time, how would we not know? Why would the church fathers not have left records of this? Because that would be huge. And then I started thinking about it, and other people really brought it up in the comments as well. First of all, a lot of people brought up the Vatican. I think that most of us realize that the Vatican is very, very secretive with its library, and it is a very rare person that has access to it. And I'm sure that there are lots of things that no one is allowed to see in there. So really, it would not be hard for information that they did not want to be let out for whatever reason to be hidden somewhere in their archives that no one can access. And also, I don't even have a picture of it here, but the Smithsonian. I mentioned this in last week's video, as I said before, but the Smithsonian, I don't know how I missed it because I talked about the Smithsonian in another one of my videos, in my Giants video, about how they're known for hiding evidence and how they're known kind of for altering the storyline or the timeline, the narrative. But yeah, the Smithsonian too could also have had a lot to do with altering this, the whole notion of what we see as history. And if you look at the Smithsonian, when the Smithsonian Institute was first created, I believe it was the 19th century, and it was right around the time that, let me just see, established 1846. So really that is right around the time that a lot of us believe that the reset might have begun. So it would make sense that something would be established at that time to maybe hide some of the things that they didn't want us talking about. In last week's video, I also talked about faking history and how it's very easy. Actually, it's much easier than what people think to fake history, because when we're in school, like we get so used to just being spoon-fed information all the time that we just aren't curious. We just kind of want people to tell us whatever it is that we're supposed to believe, and we get intellectually lazy, and we don't care what is really going on around us. So then when I came across this quote that was actually given by Helen Keller, they say Helen Keller said this at the 1904 St. Louis Exposition, of all places. If you don't know what an exposition is, it was the World's Fair in St. Louis. She gave a speech, and Helen Keller said, "People do not like to think. If one really thinks, one must reach conclusions. Conclusions are not always pleasant." And I think that that is so true in so many aspects of our lives right now. And it's something that we really need to think about. And again, I find it really ironic that it was said at the 1904 St. Louis Exposition, where if you watched some of my other videos, you will know, I believe may have been re-education, not really camps, but re-education events for the people who were set to repopulate these certain areas. So something else that I talked about in last week's video about how they may have hidden what actually happened is that I talked about how it's possible that if this 1,000-year reign already did happen, once those 1,000 years were over and Satan was loosed, as Revelation tells us will happen at the end of the 1,000 years, that Satan will be loosed for a short season, and that is the thought that we are living in that short season right now. There would inevitably have been some people who survived from the millennial reign and then came through into the short season. So the question is, where are all those people? And so then we get to these really, I believe, really creepy lunatic asylums that were everywhere in the 19th century. And if you look at them, they look like castles. And this one I think is really creepy with all the nurses standing there like that. But anyway, if you look at all of these lunatic asylums. They are just, it's so outlandish to believe that these were built to be lunatic asylums, especially when a lot of them were built in areas that really didn't even have large populations. How many insane people were there? That's the question. What are you supposed to believe? That all of these people were so, crazy, so to speak, that they had to be in these huge castles? Why did they need so much room? Looks like this one is in New Zealand. So that's something that we really need to think about. First of all, I don't believe that they were built when they said they were. I believe that they were probably already there and that they were kind of just as autodidactic. Campbell from Autodidactic and John Levi would both say they were repurposed and they were called lunatic asylums. But who knows what they were really built for? But could they have put all the people who kind of transitioned from the Thousand-Year Reign, could they have put them in these lunatic asylums to keep them from telling the truth? And I mentioned this in last week's video, and then someone sent me a very interesting, I don't remember if they sent me an article or if they just told me about it and I looked it up, but it really kind of lends credence to the theory that they could very well have been putting people in lunatic asylums, people who were trying to tell the truth, and that they didn't want, they weren't pushing the narrative. So they were kind of hidden away in these lunatic asylums and labeled crazy. So here are 125 reasons you could end up in a lunatic asylum in the 19th century. So now I'm not going to read the whole article, but yeah, there's really 125 reasons. But let's just read the beginning part here. Now, this is speaking specifically of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia, but I believe that it was really the same things that could get you into each of the lunatic asylums. But let's just look at some of the reasons that people could get put in these asylums. Where does it start? Laziness, egotism, disappointed love, female disease, mental excitement, which I think maybe that could be classified for the reason that I'm talking about. Cold, snuff, greediness, imaginary female trouble, gathering in the head. I have no idea what that means. Exposure and quackery, jealousy, religion. That's a red flag there. Asthma, I'm not even going to say the next one and get censored, and bad habits. Spouses use lunacy laws to rid themselves of their partners and in abducting their children. So yeah, it really sounds like a great time to be alive, doesn't it? So I just wanted to go down here though, because I don't want to go through all of them, but there were a few that I noticed as I was scanning through here that kind of would have also fit the whole idea of maybe that's why these people were put in these lunatic asylums, and maybe this is why they needed such large buildings, because there were so many people. Again, I'm wondering what gathering in the head is. I'm still like scrolling through here, trying to kicked in the head by a horse. Wow. Okay. Novel reading. Wow. Overstudy of religion. Okay, there's one. Overstudy of religion. Political excitement. That is kind of foreboding for this day and age, isn't it? So political excitement could have landed you in the lunatic asylum. Again, we have a politics, religious enthusiasm, religious excitement. So yes, to me, it just really does lend credence to the fact that this could very well be why they needed such large buildings. So now I just wanted to really quickly go over another idea that someone had left in comments a while back. And it actually refers to what we might refer to as Tartarian castles, or the castles of Tartaria. And if you actually look at the castles, especially in the places where they were built, they had these very large windows. Now, they do not have glass in them. And I know my kids and I studied kings and queens in a unit study several years ago and learned that they used very heavy tapestries to cover these windows and to keep the castles warm. But the fact is that if some of these castles were like in Northern Europe, I don't think that tapestries would have really been very well for heating in the middle of winter, even if they had fireplaces. So really, first, let's just look at this castle. It's absolutely beautiful. And we're to believe, that this was built in a time when they really had very basic technology. You see up here what would be called Antiquitech. And yeah, you have all of these. There's a lot of these windows. And you would have to wonder, how would they heat this place? How would the people live there stay warm, especially for where they were at? And then I came across this because someone, again, left this Bible verse here in Isaiah. It says in Isaiah 30:23-25, we read that during this time of the millennial kingdom, so that's the 1,000 years that I'm talking about, and he will give rain for the seed with which you sow the ground, and bread, the produce of the ground, which will be rich and plenteous. In that day your livestock will graze in large pastures, and the oxen and the donkeys that work the ground will eat seasoned fodder, which has been winnowed with shovel and fork. And on every lofty mountain and every high hill there will be brooks running with water in the day of the great slaughter when the towers fall. Then it says in Isaiah 30:26, we read of further blessings. Moreover, the light of the moon will be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun will be sevenfold, as the light of 7 days. In the day when the Lord binds up the brokenness of his people and heals the wounds inflicted by his blow. The light of the sun will be 7 times hotter. Could that be why? Could that be why they were able to live in these huge buildings in areas where you think that they would never be able to survive the winter? So John MacArthur says, the benefits from the natural bodies of light will be much greater. Increase of the intensity of their light will work to people's advantage, not to their detriment, as in Revelation 16:8-9. So that's something to think about. And that's also, a lot of people are speculating if this could have something to do with why it seems there were no bathrooms. Even though some of these, now obviously I know that they don't have plumbing like they did nowadays, but there was what some people believe could have been used as plumbing at that time, yet a lot of these castles don't seem to have anywhere that the people could have gone. And that's not something that I have extensively looked into. But this is an interesting article, so I'll leave this link in the description box. I always leave the links to the articles that I use in the description box below if you wanted to look further into them. But that really, that makes you think, is that how maybe these people were able to live in these houses? Because the sun was 7 times hotter, just as the book Isaiah tells us it will be during the millennial kingdom. Now, I came across this book on Gallica from an autodidactic video. If you haven't checked out his video, or not his video, his channel, you should definitely do that. Now, as a believer, I do not agree with everything that he says, but I think that he is very intelligent. He has a great point of view, and he points things out and finds things that I don't think I ever would be able to. So yeah, so I came across this on one of his videos, and it hit me right away because it was right around the time that I came out with my first Tartaria and the Millennial Kingdom video, because in that video I had been talking about the idea that Armageddon already happened, and that it was really and there are a lot of people who believe this. They believe in a historical Armageddon that happened around 70 AD, and so it could possibly have been what we know as the fall of Rome, which we have been told has, took hundreds of years, possibly could have taken place in a much shorter time period. And that, again, what we know as the fall of Rome could have been Armageddon. So here I just thought that this was really interesting. So here we see some Roman soldiers. Oh, and this is called, I don't know how to say that. I'm guessing that means Roman history. So anyway, and so this was from 1573, by the way. So we have these Roman soldiers, and they are overlooking the city. And I just like to see, looks like they have it fortified. There'll probably be a wall there. this was the one that really, really got me, because here you see someone standing there in the clouds, and you see all of these people cowering in fear. And the word that caught me right away was divinus. Now, I do not read or speak Latin. I've never taken it. So if any of you who are watching can translate this, I would love if you could, because I actually did. I tried to check the Latin English one, and it said sausage for one of them, but I think it was for the word Romulus. I have no idea. But I did try to look up what it says. And there's a commenter, Pierre, if you are watching, if you would be able to translate this, that would be awesome. But anyway, exercitum lustrans Romulus subita tempestade in coelum. I probably said that completely wrong, but that's what it says up on the top. And let me go back to the translation there. And so we know that it has something to do with Rome, because it's Romulus, and an army and a sudden storm in heaven. So that's very interesting. And then if you go down to the bottom, it says Raptus Divinus Honoribus Suis Coliter. Again, you're probably laughing at me if you take Latin, but let me just try typing that in, because I did before, and at least it didn't say anything about sausage. Because when I don't know. Maybe they have a label that's sausage now. I have no idea for Romulus. No clue. But anyway, so we type in just Raptus Divinus, and it tells us the rapture of divine. So again, I find that very intriguing, but it might change. Honoribus. Maybe I should have taken Latin. This would have been really helpful, right? Honoribus. I hope that I'm typing this in right. I'm kind of trying to do it from memory. Coliter. So the rapture of divine honors from their cultivated. So obviously the sentence must go on the next page, but the rapture of divine honors. So not really sure what that means, but again, this illustration really caught me, with someone standing in the clouds. Now, obviously I don't see a horse here, a white horse, but just standing in the clouds, and all of these people completely cowering in fear, and just seeing Divinus there, I was just like, wow. I couldn't believe it when we first saw that. So here we just see the city basically being burned up. That's what it surely looks like. Everyone is still at war. So yeah, I'll leave a link to this in the description. I don't know how he ever found this, to be quite honest, because Gallica is very hard to navigate. I really appreciate people like him who can navigate it. I just want to look at that. Yeah, so that's just another, they're all standing up there, maybe guarding. I don't know, but that photo that I showed you there, that really got me thinking. See, and with the whole idea of the possibility that 1,000 years of false history was added, that really would have to be another video entirely, because it would take so much time to explain that. But the theory is that there were 1,000 years of false history added. And really, I think a lot of people tell me to look into Anatoly Fomenko about this. I have never read any of his work though, but I will look into it at some point. But the thought is that these 1,000 years could have actually been added at the Council of Trent, when the Jesuits changed the calendar from Julian to Gregorian. And there is actually some evidence that something like that could possibly have happened. So I just wanted to show you here. So one of the things is that they're back in the, say, 500s or whatever. They didn't have like BC AD at that time. At least that's from what I've read. I could be wrong, but they did not have BC AD. And so the idea is that once they added these 1,000 years, they started to put, now we always look at that and think that says 1486. But if you look closely at it, it doesn't look like a numeral 1. It looks like an I. And so the idea is that it was put there, I for Jesus, because that is, I believe, the Latin for Jesus. So they would either put an I before the year, or they would put a J. If you look on some coins and on some maps, they will have a J, and people still, for some reason, translate it as a 1. I wish I was not able to find any with J's. So if any of you have images of the ones with the J's, I would love if you could somehow email them to me. I have my email in the description box listed down below. So the reason that they put them there is so that the people would be none the wiser. So they would, okay, we're going to start putting an I or a J because, in the year of our Lord, Jesus, 486. But over time, they would kind of transition that then to a 1 so that the 1,000 years would kind of seamlessly be there. I have some more pictures. So here, again, looks more like an I. And at first I was very skeptical. I was like, well, that just looks like a Roman numeral 1. And see 1656, or does it say I 656? And so, yeah, so I thought, well, it's just a Roman numeral 1. But why would they do a Roman numeral 1 but not the rest of the numbers? Why would only the 1 be a Roman numeral? And again, I really became convinced when I began to see the photos of the ones that did have a J in front. So this, a lot of people would say 1652, or is it I 652? I 666 sounds like a dubious year. Or is it 1666? So they kind of blurred that line. And down here, they look very similar. Is it I 652 or is it 1652? And here's another one. And see, clearly you can see that this is an I. These are letters here. And so they look the same. This one's just smaller. So is that 1785 or is that I 785? I think that's just a close-up of the same one. I don't know if I have any more. Nope, that's all that I have for now. So yeah, something else to think about. And so the idea of them inserting this 1,000 years, they kind of added in their own history. And if you do look back in history, there are a lot of things that happen that seem to be the same story, but it takes place in different times and different locations. And so a lot of it really does seem to be fictionalized, and maybe some of those timelines are kind of confused, which is why we might have thought that the fall of Rome happened, over hundreds of years, when in fact it might have been a very quick event. Is it possible? Yes. Am I saying that's absolutely the case? No way, because there's no way that I would possibly know if that's what actually happened. So, on that note, on the idea that our timeline is messed up and we see history being altered right in front of our very eyes, and a lot of people don't even seem to care, or they seem to automatically believe it just because it fits a narrative that they like, I came across another autodidactic video. He was talking about the year 536 AD. And the funny thing is that earlier in the day, I had a recommendation on YouTube from the History Channel to watch a video about 536 AD. And, I just kind of passed on it, wasn't really interested. But then I saw that Autodidactic did a video on 536 AD. And I love his point of view. So then I watched it. And when I watched it, I was like, wow, because this certainly sounds like a scenario for what happened in Revelation. Am I saying that this was the time of Revelation? No, I think that it gives us an insight of what could have possibly caused some of these things to happen, but it's something to think about. So 536 was apparently the worst time in history to be alive. So the 9th plague of Egypt was complete darkness that lasted for 3 days. But in 536 AD, much of the world went dark for a full 18 months. And again, you have to remember that we don't know how much of this. I think that sometimes they give us, like, say, 2 truths and a lie, or maybe 2 lies and a truth. Very skeptical, but I still find this very interesting nonetheless. But in 536 AD, much of the world went dark for a full 18 months as a mysterious fog rolled over Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. The fog blocked the sun during the day, causing temperatures to drop, crops to fail, and people to die. It was, you might say, the literal dark age. By the way, that 1,000 years that was inserted, it's believed that that's what we call the Dark Ages nowadays, and that the Dark Ages did not actually happen. Now, researchers have discovered one of the main sources of that fog. The team reported in antiquity that a volcanic eruption in Iceland in early 536 helped spread ash across the northern hemisphere, creating the fog. Like the 1815 Mount Tambora eruption, the deadliest volcanic eruption on record, this eruption was big enough to alter global climate patterns, causing years of famine. So there was ash, and it created a fog everywhere. It created darkness. What exactly did the first 18 months of darkness look like? The Byzantine historian Procopius wrote that the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, during this whole year. He also wrote that it seemed like the sun was constantly in eclipse, and that during this time, men were free neither from war nor pestilence nor any other thing leading to death. Sounds like a very dismal time to be alive. So the volcanic ash literally blocked out the sun. And it also says, this period of cold and starvation caused economic stagnation in Europe that intensified in 541 when the first bubonic plague broke out. So first we have the darkness, and then the darkness caused famine because the crops were not growing. I probably skipped over that, but I'll leave a link for this video too. There was famine. Now we've got plague. So when the first bubonic plague broke out, the plague killed between one-third, and one-half of the population in the Byzantine Empire or Eastern Roman Empire. So really, really interesting stuff. I think that if you're bored, this is something that is really interesting, and I think that you should definitely look into it. Oh, I also had here some Bible verses just about the sun and the moon during this time. So we have here, let's just look. Revelation 6:12. I looked when he broke the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood. A lot of this talks about, so this was during Jesus' crucifixion here. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. But in those days after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. Matthew 24:29. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light and the stars will fall from the sky. Which, you could even think of maybe as ash. I don't know. Again, I'm speculating. And the powers of the heavens will be shaken. So I'm just leaving this with you for you to look into these things. And as always, I love to read your comments. I learned so much from you, and I thank you for leaving them for me. And that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.